So before the break, you talked about, getting together with the leadership team, and that's where it really starts.
Absolutely.
How did you go about that process? Because I've sat in a lot of boardrooms where, frankly, the trust is probably the biggest issue, or the lack of trust. Not that they're going to steal from each other, but
Right.
it's just that when you make a commitment and say, I'll get something done in a certain day at a certain time, and it'll be done to a certain level, you can just see the rest of the room going, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How did you build that trust in that situation?
I think especially when you have a new team, or when you have outsiders coming into the team, or when you have a family member that has grown up with the business and now is all of a sudden a part of the team, the first thing that you have to establish is trust. So breaking down any barriers that might prevent trust. So coming up with a way to operate as a team and as a group with agreed upon measurements and agreed upon a direction, as well as a communication pattern. And not only that, is we had a little exercise, what we call Let's Get Naked. And what that really was,
Talk about that.
what that really was stripping back the layers of each person. We all know why they're in that group.
Right.
I mean, every single member of our executive team is there for a reason. But if we let our guard down, if we have an understanding of one another and an understanding of how to communicate with one another, then that's really what creates a high-performance team. And that's really what encourages and builds trust.
And it's that honesty about sharing.
It's exactly a sense of connection. In families, and it is a family business, but in families, you have a sense of connection.
Yeah.
So you can be as brutally honest with your family as possible. You need to be that way also at executive team level.
And that's that trust.
And that's that trust,
Yeah.
exactly. And I feel as if that is not there, if you can't challenge one another, if you can't have very diplomatic conversations, but challenge thought processes, then you have a bunch of people sitting in a room agreeing on something without any diverse thoughts into it. And that really is what I see Mayhew's key success is our diversification and our diversity and a reflection as to who we are, as well as the marketplace we serve. And that comes at the top.
One of the the techniques that I've used successfully is we call it a kitchen table, as opposed to a focus group. In the traditional focus groups, you have all the client sits behind the glass wall and one facilitator sits out there. What we do is we actually put the clients at the same table. And the way I open the discussion is I reflect back for people on what it's like in their own kitchen table. And of course, as you point out, at your own kitchen table, I mean, you're naked. I mean, you are basically saying how you feel, what you feel about it, and you get the honest truth. And just setting people up into that kind of a contextual discussion, I find gets people more willing to actually share what they think and to interrupt and disagree in an appropriate manner as well.
Absolutely. I think a game changer for us was I gave my executive team a fantastic book, and it's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Patrick Leoncie's book. And really at the foundation of it all is trust. And that's where the exercise Let's Get Naked came from, because really it's about stripping back those layers, understanding one another, being able to throw anything, whether you think it might be small or large, onto the table and dealing with it. And that's the team that I feel we've built today.
Yeah, and I think that issue is, I mean, I don't know how many organizations talk about we have an open door policy and they can't figure out why no one comes through the door. They talk about their communication and they can't figure out why the people who they're communicating to don't understand it or they're not listening. And it really comes down to that honesty of being able to have a two-way dialogue as opposed to the one-way dialogue.
Absolutely. It's about listening, number one. It's about being in the conversation, not behind you. Usually an individual is talking and they're thinking of the next thing that they need to say.
That conversation is just waiting my turn to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where it's being present, being only there. And another great book that I think has really helped me in my leadership is Susan Scott's book, Fierce Conversations. Fierce Conversations, in order to get that high-performance team trust as well as that respect, you need to have fierce conversations. And that was another one that really took our leadership group to that next level.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you speak about that, because when you tie that back to values, once you get aside the legal, elements of values, I mean, the
Right.
truth of the matter is, all values are appropriate. Depends on what's appropriate for you. And, what I find with some clients is they don't seem to be willing to hold people accountable to the values that they have truly identified for the organization, and have those really blunt conversations and say things like, you know what, these are our values, but I don't get the sense that you share those values, and that's okay. But if you don't want to live within those values, then this is probably not the organization you want to be in.
It's too about finding and the onboarding process and the recruitment process. It's okay to have a position that we have an opening for, and we have a need for that person, but we will not take anybody that meets the requirements. It's about fitting and understanding and truly expressing how they would fit with our culture as well as our values. The onboarding process at Mayhew is a long process.
Before you get into the onboarding process, tell me a little bit about the hiring process.
Okay, the hiring process. The hiring process is also a long process. We really have character or more of the MAPs, which I mentioned before,
Yep.
which is the performance expectations, job description. But it's not only about experience. It's about somebody's willingness to think outside the box and think about how the development path that they want to go on, and does it fit within ours, and then also does that person meet the values or live the values that this organization is.
So in that point, I mean, I used a term called character versus competence, and hiring for character first and then competence.
Absolutely.
How do you go about in your organization really digging into whether or not people are of the right character that buy into your value structure?
I bring it back to design thinking. I bring it back to understanding what it is that we do, but that need for constant improvement. So, and that need for identifying a need that's not there. So, really tapping into characteristics, skill sets that we value as an organization, and seeing the potential, in an individual, and if it's the right cultural fit, then we would take that over experience, over anything that's on a resume.
So how might you go about that? Do you use role-playing questions? Do you, I mean, what are the ways you do it?
First of all, it's definitely where we look for individuals. Where we look for individuals, whether it's on, the social media that's out there right now, you can find some wonderful candidates out there. How we go about that is we take the interview process and make it more of a panel. So we have at least 4 members of our executive team interviewing one candidate. Whether
simultaneously or individually?
Individually.
Okay.
And then as an executive team or extended management team, we meet together and we discuss that person. So a hire is not made within the organization unless, as a team, we have talked about them, their attributes, their potential, and if there's any question, it goes even further up towards the board.
Awesome. There's an organization in the UK called Pret a Manger. You may be familiar with it. And one of the things that they do is they actually bring prospective new employees in and have them work for a week with the team they'll be working with. And at the end of that, they ask the team, would you like to work with this person on an ongoing basis? Because, of course, a lot of us are pretty good at faking interviews.
Absolutely.
And so what they feel this does is it gives people real live experience working with them. And then the team may not have the final decision, but they certainly have a significant impact on whether or not this person is going to fit with the culture and they feel comfortable.
Peer interviewing is something that we've done and something that we continue to do, especially when bringing somebody into a team that's a pretty solid team. So we have a peer interviewing panel as well for some of the roles that are within our organization, and we actually had 2 people that was going to be our new customer experience manager. 2 people on his team that he was going to lead actually interviewed him and led the interview process because they identified the need for somebody to help manage them. So that was quite successful for us.
Great. Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll dig a little deeper into that process.
Great.
Thanks.